Hello and welcome to 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Glad you could join us. I'm Adam Pellerin alongside Julian McWilliams, who is a national baseball reporter for CBS Sports. Julian, my man, it's been a minute since you and I got to talk baseball. Good to see you, bud.
It's great seeing you, man. We were just talking about our old school days of trying to get in a batter's box and it just not working out. Like too bad we were big leaguers. Our
Yeah, I
heels
know,
are
right?
up. The heels are
Yeah,
up,
man.
calves hurting, and the batter's box. So yeah, no, it's good being here. Thanks.
Yeah, man, I know. Back in the day, the fields that we used to play on weren't exactly the fields that the Red Sox and big league teams play on these days. But that's all right, man. It builds character. That's what I
It
say,
builds
right?
character. Exactly. It builds character. It builds character. We're here now. This is why we made it here now.
Exactly, exactly. All right, well, we'll talk about the big league team, obviously, the Red Sox, who fell short to the Phillies in extra innings last night, a heartbreaking loss. We'll dive deep into that. We'll look back at the first series out of the break, the Cubs series as well, but we're going to take a really deep dive into the trade deadline, which is 9 days away now, July 31st, 6 p.m. All eyes on that if you're a Red Sox fan. But before we get to the deadline, Julian, how crazy was the ending to that game last night? That was unbelievable. None of us had ever seen anything like that in person in Major League history because it's only the second time it's happened. The other time was back in 1971. What an incredible way to lose a baseball game.
Yeah, and it happened on a check swing. Like it wasn't even a full
Right.
swing. Like that's the crazy part about it is like it was a check swing. My question was, I didn't understand like if it was is that an RBI? Like how does that count? Is that an RBI for the? I was trying to figure that out. Or unearned run? Do we know that? Do we know the ruling
So
on that? I don't know the ruling on that, but
it's a great
I just think
question. It's a
that's
great question.
yeah. I think that's just for how bizarre it really was because we were all sitting there like what, and then the pause and the delay is awkward, and then you see Alex Cora when he sees it, he's sort of like okay, like we lost, like he's sort of gathering his stuff even before the ruling came in. I thought it was a crazy game all overall. They had them on the ropes. They had like Zach Wheeler up to like 50 pitches in 3 innings, and Bueller's best start probably of the season. And when you have something like that and you don't cash in, it's a tough loss. But they got two more, and they got two more tough ones. So we'll see how it works out.
Yeah, really tough ones, no doubt about that. And then you got the Dodgers coming to Fenway Park after that. It just does not get any easier for the Red Sox. I think, and we'll confirm it, but I believe it would be an unearned run because catcher's interference is an error, right? So
Right.
I
Yeah.
feel like that would be an unearned run. But regardless, it's a loss for the Red Sox. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But in terms of the trade deadline, Julian, right? The Red Sox right now are 54 and 48, 6 games over 500. They're 1-3 post All-Star break. Of course, they went on that long 10-game winning streak, which, it's pretty amazing how a 10-game winning streak can change your view of this team because there were people that were ready to sell sell at the deadline, writing this team off, saying this team didn't have a shot. Now all of a sudden they're World Series contenders because they won 10 straight games. So the pendulum is swinging back and forth with this team. But, in terms of the needs for the Red Sox at the trade deadline, a lot of people are saying starting pitching, bullpen arm. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think that starting pitching would be ideal. They would love to have a starting pitching, but I don't know if that's necessarily their focus per se. If it lands in their lap, I think it'll be okay, great. But look, everybody's in the market for starting pitching right now. Go down the list and you talk about what Seth Lugo, Joe Ryan, Mitch Keller, the guys out in Zach Gallen, Merrill Kelly. Like you go through all those guys and it's tough. Like do you want to because somebody's going to have to overpay for one of those guys because the market for those pitchers is just so thin. The starting pitching market's so thin. And I think it's sort of been like that the last couple of years where people they've had to really come out of their pockets for guys that aren't necessarily grade A guys, but they get the job done at the deadline. Then I think it's probably a reliever depth that they want to hear. Obviously, somebody to go a little bit deeper into games. I think that middle relief roles are kind of a little shaky for the Red Sox. You have Chapman at the end, you have Whitlock at the end. I don't know if you throw Tanner Houck in there at some point. That might be an option, but definitely reliever depth is something that they're looking for. And then I think first base depth as well, and particularly a left-handed first baseman. So, I mean, a left-handed bat as a first baseman. So I'm looking at maybe somebody like a Josh Naylor, somebody like that could probably, help this team out. But I think it's going to be an interesting deadline. I think it's going to be fascinating because all the teams seem to be in the market for the same thing. I keep hearing Eugenio Suarez's name across everywhere, right? Oh, the Cubs want to go after Eugenio Suarez. The Yankees want to go after Eugenio Suarez. I'm like, I'm not sure if the Diamondbacks are necessarily selling, the way they've been playing the last week or so. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be fascinating coming down the stretch.
Yeah, it really is because you look at the Diamondbacks, and I would say like the majority of big names are coming from Arizona in terms of who
Yeah,
could be dealt at the deadline with all the rumors, right? You mentioned Kelly, you mentioned Naylor, Suarez, obviously. You know, we talk about the Red Sox and their need, but first, before I get to this question, pitching wise, just to your point about Tanner Houck coming out of the bullpen, I mean, you can't really count on him coming back because
yeah.
he's been just such an enigma this year, right? Because you had, last
A little
year he was like a
strange.
Cy Young candidate in the first half of the season, and then he kind of fell off, obviously, in the second half, and then you're counting on him to be probably your number two behind
Yeah.
Garrett Crochet to start the year, and then all of a sudden, like he just doesn't have it. He goes on the IL. He tries to figure it out in Worcester and Portland, and he's still not sharp. And then the injury crops up again. He's really been a mystery this year, Julian.
Certainly, and I think it's kind of been that way dating back to spring training. Even when I was on the beat, still it was just sort of like this weird sort of energy around Houck. He's typically like a accessible guy. And I wouldn't say necessarily bubbly, but really really friendly, and he's still that way. Like I'm not gonna say he's not, but clearly like success or lack of success sort of distorts who you sort of can be. I mean, it's your job, and you're not excelling at your job. It's something that sort of doesn't sit well with you. It wouldn't sit well with any of us. But the injury part of it was strange to me because I thought it was like this sort of like phantom IL thing where they're trying to put him, where he's probably needed a mental break, and I think it's a mixture of both. If I were to presume here, I think it's probably a mixture of both mental and physical because his second half wasn't necessarily that good either. He sort of started to fade a little bit toward the middle half of the season, toward the end. His stuff wasn't the same, and then he came into this year and he just looked shot. So I'm wondering if it's workload, but again, he's a big guy, and he's been able to. I mean, he made 20 starts the year before. I know he made 30 plus starts last year, but I know Craig Breslow said that's something they're gonna have to, keep an eye on his guys' workload because clearly Houck is suffering. Is catching the brunt of that.
Yeah, it's really interesting the conversation when it comes to going from reliever to starter, right? Because you got a guy on your roster right now outside of Houck. Well, a couple of guys actually, when you think about it. Garrett Crochet. I mean, Garrett Crochet
Yeah,
last year, a career high 146 innings. This year, it's a big question mark. He's already had 135 and a third, I believe, this year, and so you're keeping an eye on him. But the guy that I actually was initially referring to is Jordan Hicks, right? Because he was a
yeah,
successful relief pitcher, especially in Toronto a few years back in the postseason. The Giants tried to make him a starter. It didn't work out. Now he's going back to the bullpen. He's coming off an injury, not arm related, but still, that sort of transition from reliever to starter, it doesn't always work out. And you sort of wonder, even though Houck had a successful year last year, you sort of wonder, and again, Whitlock, right? Garrett Whitlock, another
yeah,
guy
yeah. I was going to mention
who's
him.
now a
Yep.
full-time reliever, right? Exactly. So you sort of wonder if maybe the bullpen is the right spot for Houck in the long run.
It might be, and look, the year before I sort of flip flopped on this, right? And now you can call me sort of this fair weather fan, fine. But the year before in 2023, I said no, you got to put this guy in the bullpen, and then he showed what he could do as a starter. It just seemed like, I remember I talked to him once in Pittsburgh last year, and he says, I'm like, what's different? He's like, I'm just out there playing catch. And I thought like Bailey's philosophy of spin, spin, spin would work well with him because he is actually a guy that can really, really spin the ball, right? He's not one of these people that is trying to learn to spin the ball. No, like when he came up, like we saw him on Pitching Ninja like every other day, even though he was giving up maybe 2 or 3 runs an outing, but his stuff moves. And I think that's sort of the problem. He's not doesn't have necessarily the same break on his sweeper that we've seen in the past. But again, I think it comes down to a mental part. And again, Whitlock, like you said, he was a guy that couldn't hold up physically to be a starter. Maybe Houck struggles at turning over a lineup. Those things are hard. I remember Walker Buehler said pitching is hard, starting is hard. So maybe you can give him another chance as a starter, but throw him in the bullpen so he can get some confidence, because he might just be needing a guy to get it and go. And that's fine. He was very, very good as a starter in 2022. And I think that's what people forget. I mean, as a reliever in 2022. And I think that's what people forget, is how effective he was in that sort of that 7th, 8th inning role. And if you can get him back to that, that's a weapon for you in the second half of the season. But again, I think it starts here. And I'm not sure if he has it here. It has it right here right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you get into these high leverage situations down the stretch, if you're in a playoff race, right, you don't have full confidence in your stuff or who you are on the mound. I mean, that can be a tough situation. And you add to this the Hunter Dobbins injury, right? And that was a
Yeah.
guy, who was a big surprise for the Red Sox and was pitching very well, very solid. And now he's not in the mix either. So that's why people are looking at
Cutter
adding
Crawford's
a
another one
starter.
too.
Great point. Great point.
Yeah.
So Cutter Crawford not in the mix as well. But Julian, in terms of the Red Sox targeting starting pitching, they would prefer to have a guy under control for a number of years, right, and not just a rental situation.
Yeah, 100%. Like I don't think they want to be in that sort of rental spot, because the Red Sox are playing better, and I think they do have a shot at the postseason, because I think this team is a lot better than the previous teams. If you just like look at the roster, you look at the positioning, but there's still a growing team, right? There's still a young core group of guys: of Marcelo, Rafaela, Roman Anthony, Christian Campbell, if he can get here. So they're still looking toward the future. Now, that doesn't mean they don't necessarily go all in and get the guy that they want. I just think it has to be a measured look for it to be a starter. I don't see them getting a rental for a starter unless it's, I don't know, like Joe Ryan.
Charlie
I don't
Morton.
think the Phillies are giving up. Charlie Morton, and they just see a window where they can get possibly 2 starters, maybe Charlie Morton and the guy who's under control. So I'm not sure how they go in that direction, but I think they would ideally like to have a starter that's under control, because you have this young group of guys that's really, really fascinating. I mean, you just look at the future of these guys you throw Garrett Crochet into the mix. That's somebody that the Red Sox have not had in years, right? We could have easily seen that series turn into a sweep. In any other years, like, it would have probably been a sweep. But the fact that he's such a really, really good pitcher and a dominant ace, I think that's what this team needs. And you could add on something else to that, they could be a little bit scary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned Charlie Morton just because that could be a low cost option at the
Yeah.
deadline if some of these other pitchers are scooped up by other teams, just to sort of solidify the back end of your bullpen. You look at the numbers for Morton; they don't look great, but he's pitched better as of late. He's a veteran; he's pitched in the postseason, so that could be valuable to you as the season wears on. I do want to continue our conversation about the trade deadline on the other side too, Julian. But we will look back at the Cubs series, which you actually mentioned. Maybe last year they don't win a game in that series because of the fact that they didn't have a Garrett Crochet or an Alex Bregman. So we'll talk about that. We'll also get into the Phillies series. We touched on it a little bit at the top about how crazy that was, but there was a lot more to that game. So stay right there. 3:10 to left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. We'll be right back.
3:10 to left is presented by your New England Ford dealers, who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 3:10 to left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox.
All right, welcome back to 3:10 to left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. Adam Pellerin back with Julian McWilliams. And so we were talking about the trade deadline and, the Red Sox needs, and obviously starting pitching, bullpen arm, that would be great. But, what about a bat, Julian? I know you mentioned Josh Naylor, first base, before the break, but
Yeah.
another bat that could be out there because of the fact that the Braves, they've fallen below expectations as well. Marcell Ozuna, who, if you look at the numbers at Fenway Park, my goodness, the second
He
highest
kills them.
OPS of any ballpark. He does. He's got 7 home runs in 13 games, and I think it was a 3 home
And
run
they're
game that
like
he had back in
moonshots,
2020,
Adam.
right? Yeah, they are. They are. And this is a guy who is exclusively a designated hitter, right? And I think that so we've talked a lot about the Red Sox and pitching being a priority at the deadline, but I mean, do we not forget that we traded the best bat in the lineup?
Yeah.
A month ago, and so that still isn't going away. Like, you don't have Rafael Devers, you don't have outside of Alex Bregman, you don't have that big bopper in your lineup, and I wouldn't even call Bregman like that big bopper type, right? Like, you get 25 home runs out of him. So do you think that they go after a power bat at the deadline, or should they?
It's funny. I was just talking with Ian Brown of MLB.com, who's been obviously covering the Red Sox for years, and we both mentioned Marcell Ozuna on Sunday. We were like, why? I think that would be a really good fit. I do think they need another bat, right? I think if you look at Bregman, even if you look at Bregman now, you could still tell he's injured, right? And I think that was an injury that probably in any other year we probably wouldn't see him until September. He's clearly grinding through it, and I'm not sure. I'm not going to say he can't hold up because he's obviously a veteran. He's been doing this for a while and knows his body. But I'm not sure if you'll get the A+ Alex Bregman that we saw pre-injury. And so that draws me a little bit more concerned, where I'm just like, they do need another bat. And I think Marcell Ozuna would be a really good choice. What they do at that DH position, though, with Masataka Yoshida and all those other guys would be fascinating to see, because something's going to have to give there, right? I think they're a little bit too crowded in that area. But Marcell Ozuna, man, like you talked about, he's a veteran, and the numbers aren't there. I think he has 13 homers, but man, that can flip when you're playing on a good team. We've seen it every single year where certain things flip. I remember I was talking to a veteran pitcher actually, and he was like, he's going on rehab assignments. He sucked on rehab assignments. He was terrible. He was like, but there was something about getting back to the big leagues where it's like you tap into a different space of meaningful baseball games, and you're like, okay, like this is normal now, and you get back to being who you are. So it's hard. So it's hard for me to judge any of those guys on really bad teams. Luis Robert is another guy. I'm like, what happened to him, right? Because we looked at him as such a stud on Chicago White Sox when they were playing actually meaningful games, and then once they hit the cellar, it was like, oh, like, there's probably more to this than just, him not playing well. So I think Marcell Ozuna will be a great pick for sure.
Yeah, and again, I know we've talked about Suarez, being a hot name at the deadline. It seems like he's going to get moved. The Red Sox haven't been mentioned in any of that, but, that's a guy who can play third base. And you mentioned Alex Bregman, right? I mean, maybe you move him to DH, right? Because the quad's barking, you trade one of your outfielders, you have Yoshida, you could maybe, I don't know who would take, take up that contract, but,
he's running like Stanton.
Yeah, I know. That ball
that Roman hit down the line, I think off Zach Wheeler, that when he went first to third on. Any other guy, like, you can give me Alejandro Kirk. He's probably scoring on that.
No, you're right, and you're holding your breath too, watching him run, because he's not running at 100%. And even Lou joked during the finale against the Cubs where he hit the 3-run bomb. He's coming around the bags and he's coming to home plate, and they're doing their celebration, and Lou's like, "Don't jump too high." Right? Because they're all like doing that, and he's jumping. It's like, don't jump too high, right? So you're sort of walking on eggshells when it comes to Bregman. So, maybe just being a DH, might be a good thing for him too moving forward. The other thing, and this one's a little bit on the margins, and this one's a little out there, and I was thinking about it, right? So we've talked about, the catching situation with the Red Sox and how great of a year Carlos Narvaez is having, although not post All-Star break, but overall he's been very good. Connor Wong, though, has has had a miserable season, unfortunately, right? This was a guy who was your starting catcher. He got hurt early in the year, and then he just
CFA
never
territory.
got his groove back. Yeah, man. And so I'm looking at maybe making a move for a catcher. And one guy that sort of grabbed my attention. How about Christian Vasquez in a reunion with the Red Sox? Right? You have
Yeah.
he's in Minnesota. The deal's expiring. The defensive numbers are still pretty good. And I know the offensive numbers aren't great. He's hitting under 200. But if you, like you said, right, different setting for a guy. Bring him back to Fenway Park, where he's had success before. I mean, is that something you think the Red Sox could entertain looking for, maybe a backup catcher at the deadline as well?
Definitely, and I think that's somebody. If you bring up a good point, I think that's somebody. I didn't even think of Christian Vasquez. That's somebody, he knows the market. He knows, obviously has a great relationship with Alex Cora, great relationship with the Red Sox in general. And there's certain guys that you know, Adam, that they're juice guys. Like they need that sort of that energy from the ballpark. I think you can throw probably Christian Vasquez in there. Probably Xander Bogaerts is another guy. I think him being away from Fenway has played a role in him not having this success, because I feel like he was built for Red Sox fans. He was built for this market. So you're looking at Christian Vasquez, and all you need in a backup catcher, really, you're not really thinking about the offensive production. You're just thinking about controlling a pitching staff, right? And Adam, you were a catcher, I believe, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like controlling a pitching staff and just not screwing anything up, right? And I think in that sense, he wouldn't do, like, he has so much experience as a starter, as a backup. Remember when he went to the Astros, he was a huge part of that World Series ring. The way he played in that World Series, the way he played against the Yankees, I believe, and the way he just handled himself. And he was not starting. He was behind Martin Maldonado, but he came in for certain games and he did really, really well. And that was a big reason why he won that second ring. So I think that would be a fascinating person to bring back, and I think it'll be sort of probably the best move in the Red Sox mind if they can if they don't have to give up too much from, which I don't think Minnesota will, because I think they know that they're not necessarily where they want to be, and they're sort of wasting someone. I spoke to somebody from Minnesota last night. They said we're wasting a great season from Byron Buxton, who's been phenomenal for them. So, but I definitely think Christian Vasquez would be a great pick, and great to come back to this team, and he's probably and be a leader of this team as well.
Yeah, and I like Connor Wong, and I'm not trying to ship him out of town, and I hope he turns it around if he remains on the roster. But you know how it is, Julian. Sometimes when
It's
it
tough
comes
to
to
watch,
guys
yeah.
who are struggling in one place, right, a change of scenery can do them well, right? Do them good, and maybe that's what a guy like Connor Wong needs. He needs a change of scenery, get out of the scrutiny of being in Boston, going to a place like Minnesota, right, or you don't have as much scrutiny, and getting a fresh start and getting an opportunity there. That might be what the doctor ordered. We've seen it in the past.
Yeah, and look, I've never seen, like, because Connor Wong was a good hitter last year. I mean, you remember if like
He
he
was.
talked to you talked to Pete Fatsi, and I remember he told me, he said, in a home run derby, I wouldn't put him to beat Rafi, but that's how much raw power he has. Like, he would compete with him in a home run derby, like in terms of just raw sheer power. And you saw it at certain points. You're like, whoa, like, how did that homer come out of that little body right there? But obviously he's a strong guy, strong legs, quick bat, athletic. But unfortunately, you don't need your catcher to be fast, right? It's like he has all the tools that you really don't necessarily care about as a catcher. But it's been rough for him. It's rough for him last year behind the plate, but I think the offensive numbers sort of, made up for it somewhat. But this year, when you have sort of the same catching flaws that you have and you're not hitting, that's rough.
It is rough. And that brings me to Carlos Narvaez. We've seen, again, mentioned a great year for Narvaez, but a tough post All-Star break. And there's a lot of concerns, I think, if you look at it. Well, not a lot of concerns, but there might be concerns about the workload, right? Because he has 5 major league games under his belt. He's now the full-time guy. And here we are. He's catching, 2 out of every 3 games. Is there any concern, for you in that regard?
For me, yeah, and I go back to even and I know it's a different position, but I go back to sit down Rafaela last year in August and September. And I think the shifting from a center field to shortstop took its toll on him, not just physically, but mentally. You know, you have to be on all the time as a catcher, right? And I don't think that's what people realize is like that position is so demanding and you have to be in on every single play. I was talking to Mookie earlier in the season. That might be another one, right? I think you probably might have to move Mookie off a shortstop, right? It's like it's a lot to handle, particularly at his age and his height and everything. He got sick in the beginning of the year, and I've talked to him earlier in the year. And he said, look, the difference is I have to be engaged in every pitch. In the outfield, I'm thinking about my swing, right? In right field, I'm thinking about, okay, how can I get to this ball, whatever? Oh, ball hits me. Okay, let me go catch that. Now let me go back to thinking about my swing again, right? But at shortstop and catcher, and especially catcher, you have to be on all the time. So the mental fatigue that comes with that can be derailing. And particularly for a guy in Narvaez who's never, ever done it, right? You're looking at him and he's a guy that's he's never played more than, never had more than what, 50 – how many? I forget.
Well,
how
I
many
know
games he played
I believe he only
level.
had 5 major league games. Major league games under his belt. Right?
Yeah, 5 major league games under his belt. So there's a lot of that too, and I think there's a lot of that on this roster. I don't mean to get off like topic, but we talked about Garrett Crochet. Like, what's he going to look like in this second half of the season? Because last year they held him to like 4 2/3 innings. They never let him go over 5 innings, right? And he didn't look that good in the second half of last year. So there's a lot of what ifs. And I think if you bring somebody back like a Christian Vasquez who's been here before, who can guide Narvaez and saying, okay, this is how you get through it. This is how you take care of your body on this day. This is how you get through these things. That could be beneficial for him because he has a runway. He has a database to be able to do those things, to say those things, whereas Connor Wong doesn't. Connor Wong is still trying to get his feet wet in the big leagues. Regardless of whatever season he had last year offensively, he's still trying to figure this catching thing out. And to have somebody like Narvaez in there who's really, really talented, but necessarily doesn't have that other player in his ear. I know Jason Varitek is there, but it's something about having that other player there as well to be able to talk to you. And Christian Vasquez can be huge in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the catching position being the most difficult in baseball, and Cal Raleigh. I mean, the what he's done in Seattle is just remarkable offensively, right? And I think he should get, MVP votes without question. And the thing about catchers too, they're the best looking guys, Julian. So, that's another thing that we all have going for us as well.
You're the best looking guy I've ever seen, Adam.
Man. I appreciate you, man. I love doing shows with Julian McWilliams, and we're going to continue to talk some ball after the break. We talked a lot about the trade deadline and the needs. Well, let's talk about the second half so far for the Red Sox. And, again, a lot of comparisons being made to the last couple of years. Is that fair? We'll talk about that next on 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. Welcome back to 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. Adam Pellerin, Julian McWilliams back with you. So the Red Sox are 1-3 post All-Star break, Julian. They're still 6 games over 500. They still have a 1.5 game lead for the final wild card spot. They're still only a couple of games back of the Yankees in the division. They're now 6 games back of the Blue Jays because they continue to win games. So the division hill a little tougher to climb, but you look at the first couple of games of the second half for the Red Sox against the Cubs. Tough losses. Starting pitching kept you in, but at the end of the day, the offense let you down. You had the dramatic win in the finale against the Cubs, thanks to Wilyer Abreu and Alex Bregman and Garrett Crochet, able to give you 6 innings, allowing just the 1 run. And so when people talk about last year, right? Because they had the same record through 100 games the last 3 seasons. And when you talk about last year, losing your first 3 series, going 2-7 overall, the comparisons were being made after the first 2 losses to the Cubs. But then you win that finale. And I think that's the difference, Julian, is that exactly what you said earlier. They wouldn't have won that game last year coming out of the break. Now they have an ace. Now they have a gamer in Alex Bregman. And they have a closer in Aroldis Chapman who wasn't called to duty in that game, but you have him at the back end of the bullpen. You didn't have that last year, and I think that should give you a little bit more optimism as you look at this Red Sox team moving forward.
Yeah, and another thing that you have defense, right? I think you look at the play of Trevor Story at shortstop, the play of Marcelo Meyer at second. How many double plays did they turn last night that they wouldn't have turned otherwise? So I think if you're looking at those things, sorry, my dog's in the background.
Is that who's that?
That's my wife's dog. He's brutal. He's the worst one.
I like how you said that's my wife's dog, not my dog.
Not my dog. Not my dog. He's crazy. He's nuts. I have my dog. He's not him. But now I take care of him all the time since the baby came. But anyways, but no, I think I think if you look at the guys that they have now, from Bregman on the left side of the field versus a Rafael Devers, who's a great hitter but struggled defensively, they don't have David Hamilton at shortstop anymore. Emmanuel Valdez at second base, right? I think those things matter. They don't have Connor Wong behind the plate, and I'm not trying to dump on these guys, but there comes a time where I think defense really, really matters. And last year, you had teams telling, like, I literally heard from other teams saying, hey, when the ball's hit on the ground with the Red Sox, run. Don't assume an out, right? And because they will find a way to throw it away. They had Romy Gonzalez at first base full time for a while. Their outfield defense was good last year, but like their infield defense was horrible. And I think that's the difference with this team for me, is the defensive aspect of it. I'm gonna take him out of here soon. Is a defensive aspect of it because they've been able to shore up their defense. And I think having Trevor Story back healthy again, right? I know he's not hitting necessarily from a standpoint of being able to, he's hit better. I'm sure he has a 700 OPS now, or at least climbed up to 700 over the weeks. And I think just having him back healthy has meant a lot to this club. So I think it's a much different team than we've seen in the past, because you do have that stopper in Garrett Crochet. You do have the defense. But for the thing for me that they're going to have to add, I think, is another bat. Because like you said, Adam, there's no replacing Rafael Devers.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And all this talk of adding pitching at the deadline, which is fine, and I agree with that, but I feel like you have some offensive deficiencies that need to be addressed. And if you look at the offensive numbers through the first 4 games, now granted, you're facing two of the best teams in not only the National League, but in Major League Baseball. And I think the Brewers, finally have the best record in baseball because they've been red hot as well. So they've overtaken the Cubs. Yeah, they've been on a heater too, right? So the National League looking pretty strong, no doubt about that. But in terms of, the Cubs, I believe, were second in Major League Baseball in runs scored, and tied for second in the National League, and tied for third, I believe, in home runs. So you're facing a really good offensive team right out of the chute.
Oh, yeah.
And your starting pitching was up to the task. And even though the first inning, was decided the game in the first 2 games of the series, you had your 2 starting pitchers in Lucas Giolito and Brian Bayo pitch into the 6th inning. Bayo gave you 6 full innings and gave you a quality start, but both guys were able to grind. And to your point, Garrett Crochet was able to give you 6 innings and only allow the 1 run. And it was a little dribbler down the first baseline off the bat of Ian Happ on a changeup, right? So he was very good against an excellent offensive team. And then in game 1 of the series against the Phillies, you're able to get 7 innings from Walker Buehler, and it seems like he's turned the corner a little bit, which would be huge for the Red Sox. And so that gives you some optimism. The starting pitching, which, again, I believe best in Major League Baseball in the month of July with a 2.49 ERA, that's encouraging.
Yeah, it's certainly encouraging. And, like, going back to the point about Bayo, like, how many times last year would you just see him lose his composure and just blow up? Right, he just had those innings where you saw him just. I remember there was one in Kansas City where he was like rolling, and then all of a sudden, it just spiraled, and it spiraled like to a point where you're just like, it turned a really, really good start into a bad start like that. And so when I saw that first inning yesterday, I was like, this is going to happen. Okay, we're going to see this type of Bayo, right? We're going to see this type of Bayo where he's going to lose his composure. He's going to lose all his bearings and all this stuff. Andrew Bailey's going to go out there for a visit, and he's only going to last 3 2/3 innings and going to have 80 to 90 pitches under his belt. But that didn't happen. He was somehow able to get out of it. And then you talk about the fact of Lucas Giolito. He's been really good. And I know he gave up 4 runs in his last outing, but it wasn't necessarily that type of outing. If you even look at his numbers before that, he's been really great for this team. And I think it's going to be fascinating down the stretch what they do. But if they can keep up with the starting pitching, and I think that's probably why it's not necessarily a priority, because I do believe that they believe in their starting pitching. But if they keep up with this, I think this can be a force. People had this rotation as the best rotation in baseball coming into this year, right? People forget that. Some people had it as the best rotation. They were like, you pair Houck with Garrett Crochet, with Walker Buehler, with Lucas Giolito and Brian Bayo. That's one of the best rotations. That's probably the best rotation in baseball. It didn't work out that way, but you still have 3 or 4 of those guys left that can make a difference here. And if Walker Buehler can get it going, this team has a chance to do some things in the second half of the season.
Yeah, that's what you're keeping an eye on, I think. I think you're keeping an eye on Walker Buehler, and if he can maintain the success that he's had, and this was his best start probably of the year, maybe I'd have to go back and look at the numbers, but I would say it's his best start in terms of all eyes being on him in Philadelphia against an excellent team, going up against Zach Wheeler and outdueling Zach Wheeler in that start.
Yes.
And so now you've had 3 consecutive starts. The first start, 5 innings, 3 runs. The second start was a quality start, 6 innings, 3 runs, even though he allowed the 2 home runs. And then this start, 7 innings, only allowing the 2 runs. I mean, that would be huge for the Red Sox moving forward if he can get it together.
Yeah, I think if you look at even just the pitching staff in its totality, if you look at having Bale on track, like I said, just Giolito on track, and then you get Walker Buehler, his cutter the other night, I mean, that thing was moving, right? And I was like, what is that pitch, right? It had like even some 2-seam action to it. It was kind of weird, like, but his stuff was on, and when he's on, he's really on. I mean, I think the fastball has been a thing for Walker that's he's had to adjust to in terms of not having that lively fastball that he used to have with the huge ride and all that stuff and at the end, because we knew him for that in his days with the Dodgers. But all of a sudden, the second Tommy John surgery, you got to get a little bit more creative, and there's an adjustment period that comes with that. But these guys are pros for a reason, and if he figures that out, again, like I said, I think that's good news for this team, because there's been so many starts this year where they've hit offensively, but Buehler just didn't get it done. I mean, the start against Seattle where I think it was like 7 walks and 2 hit batsmen, I've never seen that before. I mean, we talked about the batter's interference. I've never seen 7 walks and 2 hit batsmen, but there comes a change. There comes a time where change in things and change of scenery can sort of be a lot for a guy. And I think him going from LA to Boston has sort of got to him a little bit in terms of just not being in his usual environment. So I think getting him acclimated to this system, getting him acclimated to this program has been beneficial to him. And he said it about himself. He's like, I'm not fighting for success. I'm fighting to stay in the big leagues. Like, that's what I'm doing right now. That's how bad it got for him. So good for him that he's figured out these last 3 starts.
Yeah, and since then, the 3 starts that followed have been very good. I mean, overall, especially relative to what we had seen prior to that start after against the Blue Jays, I believe it was, and some of the starts before that, you mentioned Seattle. So yeah, good on Walker Buehler, but also just a quick point before we go to break. You're talking about Buehler. Adjusting. You're talking about Giolito. We talked earlier about Garrett Whitlock and the success that he's starting to have, because it didn't start off great for Whitlock this year. Those are all guys that are coming off injury. All of those guys are coming off arm injuries. And I know Bueller pitched in the World Series last year, but still, like,
But it was 10
getting
innings, right?
now
Like it's
exactly. And so getting a full season under his belt, Whitlock in the starting rotation last year has the arm injury, now back to the bullpen. So he had to make an adjustment. So sometimes it takes time for these guys to get adjusted to either a different role or just getting adjusted to being back on a major league mound and pitching in a full season, and position players as well. We've seen that with Trevor Story now. Finally
yeah.
playing a full season of healthy baseball. So good stuff right there. All right. We'll wrap things up on 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers, coming up next.
310 to Left is presented by your New England Ford dealers, who've been taking everyone out to the ball game at Fenway Park for decades. Catch Ford next time you're at Fenway, including in the Ford Clubhouse, a full-service bar perfect for bringing your lineup together and for recording our live edition of 310 to Left. It's all brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling trucks for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox.
All right, Adam and Julian back with you as we bring you our final thoughts here on this episode of 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. So we've talked trade deadline, we've talked Cubs, Phillies, Red Sox getting ready to play game 2 of that series tonight, and so looking to bounce back. And we talk about the deadline, we talk about what the Red Sox needs may be and who they may target and what positions they may target, whether it be starting pitcher, arm in the bullpen, maybe a position player, maybe get a bat, bolster the offense a little bit. Now the question is, what is it going to take to get one or more of those players to come to Boston? Because everybody's looking for those types of things at the deadline, and the price is going to be very high. And, it might not just be prospects going out of town. It might be somebody on the major league roster. And so, how likely do you think the Red Sox would be willing to part with somebody from the major league roster?
They're going to have to, right? And I think, like you said, if you trade Rafael Devers, you better be ready to make some moves to make your team better. And a name that I would throw out there that people probably would like, whoa, I would never do that. And I'm going to just throw it out there, but I'm not necessarily saying I agree with it, but I would certainly entertain is Marcelo Meyer, right? I think if you can get controllable pitching going forward that can make your team better, I don't know, because look, this is how this typically works, right? One of the guys is going to be a stud, and I think that stud is going to be Roman Anthony, and then the two other guys, one might be okay, he might be fine, and then one's going to be a bust, right? I don't think it's going to be a situation where all three of those guys are going to be this talent of the linchpin to the organization going forward, 9-time All-Stars. Like, this is how we talk about our prospects in Boston, right? We just pump them up so much, and it's like, whoa. Like, there's like only one Dustin Pedroia. Like, there's only one no Derek Jeter, Nomar Garcia Power. Like, those guys are unique. Right? I think they're unicorns in some sense. But you're going to have to, if you're going to get what you want, it's going to call, I'm guarantee you they're calling for Marcelo Meyer. There are people, they're like, okay, we know Roman's untouchable. But I guarantee you people might say Christian Campbell, might say Marcelo Meyer. It might take that. And it might upset fans. But again, if you get what you want, you got to make the move. I wouldn't do that for a rental. I would do that for something that's under control. So, I mean, that might be a little hot take-ish, but, what can we do here?
I think we found the clip we're going to post for 310 to Left on social media, Julian, because that's hot, baby. That is red hot. And I also was sort of watching out for the comments that are a barrage of comments coming from angry Red Sox fans with the suggestion that you could actually trade Marcelo Meyer. I'm not worried about you, buddy. I know how you can handle yourself. Yeah, that's interesting. And again, I'm not ready to do that quite yet. And I think that, yes, it does depend. Like if you, right? No, I like that. I like it.
I think that, but it's gonna take the logic is gonna the thinking of that mindset is gonna have to be there of like, we're gonna have to trade somebody. we can't get too attached to these guys, right? Like you look at the Yankees last, like in 2017, they could have had Justin Verlander. I think it was like it was the non-waiver. Remember I forget what it was. And you can pick guys up beyond the trade deadline.
The waiver trade deadline,
right,
which is no longer in place, right?
Right, but they didn't want to give up Miguel Andujar and Clint Frazier, and Houston went on to win the World Series.
Yeah, right.
Like, and I think those are the things that you have to be able to be fine sometimes with giving up. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but the mentality for them has to be that, because it hasn't been that in years, Adam. How many times have we seen this team just play the middle, right? With like Lucas Sims, Luis Garcia, gosh, the name goes Danny Jansen. They're trying to convince us that Danny Jansen is going to be we like his pull side power. How'd that work out? Like, go get me a guy. Go get me a Marcelo Ozuna. You feel like you can win it? Go get this guy. I feel like fans will, sometimes it works out that way. Like, you just have to make the moves. Like, people talk about the Mets trading Pete Crow Armstrong. Okay, that sucks. But those type of things happen.
Yeah.
Right? Those type of things sometimes happen. And you got to be willing to put yourself out there and fail.
Right. Well, the Nationals, right, with Juan Soto, and they ended up getting Mackenzie Gore, right, and James Wood and all that stuff. So, much different situation for the Nationals at that point. But if you're going to do something like that, you have to get a stud with control back, right, like a Joe Ryan, right, frontline starter type of player, pitcher, right, and B, you have to really think that this team has what it takes to go out there and compete for a World Series. Like, that's the bottom line. So if the Red Sox make a move like that, they really believe in this roster if they're willing to part ways with a Marcelo Meyer, for example, type. I don't know if I don't who knows what the mindset is.
But I don't think they would do that. But I think Jarren Duran's a possibility. To be honest, I'm kind of confused now, because 3 weeks ago I was saying, Aroldis Chapman, get rid of him, right? But now they're not going to do that because they're in the playoff run. And like, closers are so important to a playoff run, because those are the one guys that can pitch every day, right? And so if you're looking at that, it's like, okay, we're not going to get rid of him. He's too valuable. And I think they like the situation with Jarren Duran, where he's sort of like this platooning and DHing or whatever. It's kind of weird, because it's like, why is this such an athletic guy who hits for some power but not really a power hitter, our DH on certain days? And I get the fact of Roman Anthony you can't DH him at 21 years old, like Alex Cora said that. But I think they like that situation where they could sort of cycle those guys in and out that they have going right now. But something's going to have to give. Something, whether it's Wilyer, whether it's Duran. I'm not sure if I would do Wilyer, because the value playing Fenway, a right field at Fenway, is so huge. So I think it's going to have to at least be Duran if you're really looking at it, because it's not going to be Roman. I don't think it's going to be Marcelo, although I would entertain it if I really wanted to. But,
clearly.
Yeah.
I am not trading Wilyer Abreu.
No.
I think this is a guy that could be a 30, 35 home run guy, when all is said and done, because
he might get there this year. He has 19, I think.
Yeah, he's got 20 now. He's got 20 because he had the multi-home run game against the Cubs. So his first 20 home run season, he's a Gold Glove right fielder. You don't have what I was talking about earlier. I think you still need to replace, on some level, the Rafael Devers production, right? Whether that's going out and getting just a Marcelo Ozuna or somebody else that can give you, some pop. I mean, right now he's your leading home run hitter, so you're not dealing that guy. The outfield is a position of strength for the Red Sox right now. They have a surplus of outfielders, and so logically it makes sense, for them to entertain moving one of those guys. And you mentioned Jarren Duran as a possibility. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. But there are other areas of your roster that could use some reinforcements. And I think that if you deal from a position of strength, obviously that makes you better all around.
Yeah, I think, and the one guy that's sort of crowding the roster for me is Masataka Yoshida, right? It's
Yeah.
because it's the contract more. It's not necessarily like it's the fit, but it's also the contract, right? Like he has what 2 more years left on his deal, and who wants to
Yep.
pay for that? I don't think any team necessarily wants to pay for that. The Red Sox certainly don't want to take on that money, but if there's going to be a move that has to be made that includes him, they're going to have to in some sense. I think he's somewhat crowding this roster.
Yeah, that's a guy I think that definitely if somebody's willing to take on the 2 years after this year, it's something the Red Sox would strongly consider. Well, a lot of question marks, Julian.
Strongly.
A lot of question marks about the Red Sox. Strongly, yes. A lot of question marks about the Red Sox as we move towards the trade deadline, July 31st, 9 days from now. The final question I have for you is, how's the dog doing? Okay.
The dog is kicked out. I kicked the dog out, Adam. I'm so
All
tired of
right.
that dog. I've taken him on. I've adopted him as my own. It's
Yeah, he's
it's
out.
hell. He's
All
out.
right. Well, we're out too. We're done here on 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years, the official truck of the Boston Red Sox as well. Julian, it was a blast, man. We'll see you next time on 310 to Left.